The sharp strike reverberated through the cabin. Every face went rigid as the shocking impact rippled through the air. The usual hum of conversation vanished, replaced by an unsettling stillness that swept over everyone. All eyes instinctively converged on seat 1A, where an eerie silence reigned supreme. The flight attendant's hand lingered in mid-air, a frozen echo of her furious blow, while her expression contorted with raw anger and disbelief. In that charged moment, she was convinced she was reining in a disruptive passenger. Little did she know that the man she had just struck was not merely any traveler, but the owner of the entire airline. In a heartbeat, the consequences of her impulsive act were poised to shatter her world. Before we start the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. The first-class cabin was nearly full, the soft hum of conversation blending with the faint rustling of newspapers and the clinking of glasses. Ethan Blackwell occupied seat 1A with an effortless air of calm, his relaxed posture as he casually flipped through a magazine, setting him apart from the boisterous chatter and ostentatious displays of wealth around him. His appearance was impeccable. A neatly pressed black dress shirt with sleeves rolled just enough to reveal a luxury watch on his wrist, a subtle nod to refinement that only true connoisseurs of quality would appreciate. His dark slacks and polished shoes completed an ensemble that exuded understated elegance, effortlessly drawing admiring glances from those who noticed. Yet despite his refined demeanor, there was an inexplicable quality about him that unsettled Ava, the flight attendant assigned to first class that evening. Ava, with over a decade of experience in handling high-profile passengers, was well-versed in their predictable mannerisms, the confident strides, the commanding voices, the overt demands. In her eyes, first-class travelers were a familiar breed, self-assured, sometimes even entitled, always exuding an air of superiority. But Ethan was different. He wasn't engaged in animated phone calls or hurriedly checking his emails. Instead, he was immersed in the quiet world of his magazine, as if he could belong anywhere without needing to assert his status. His unassuming presence and calm composure stirred an inner disquiet within Ava, a nagging suspicion that defied her seasoned instincts. Ava passed by him once, then again, each time feeling an intensifying pull of unease. Something about his demeanor felt off, and she couldn't shake the thought that he didn't quite fit the mold of the typical first-class businessman. She finally stopped beside his seat, her expression composed but her tone resolute. "Sir, are you sure you're in the right seat?" Ethan looked up slowly, his deep brown eyes meeting hers without hesitation. His face showed no confusion, no irritation, just calm understanding. "Yes," he said simply, reaching into his pocket and pulling out his boarding pass. He handed it to her without a word. Ava took it and scanned it quickly. Seat 1A, first class, verified. Her lips pressed together. His name, Ethan Blackwell, matched the passenger manifest. The ticket was valid, everything checked out. But something inside her refused to let it go. She forced a polite smile and handed the ticket back. "All right, thank you," she said stiffly, then turned away. Ethan didn't react. He simply took his boarding pass and slid it back into his pocket, casually flipping another page in his magazine, as if the brief exchange were nothing more than a passing moment. Yet Ava remained rooted near the front of the cabin, her arms crossed as she watched him with a mix of suspicion and unease. Glancing over at Maya, who was busy preparing drinks in the galley, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was amiss. "Something's not right," Ava murmured. Maya glanced over, raising an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Ava leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "Passenger in 1A. Something feels off. He doesn't act like he belongs here." Maya frowned. "What? You checked his ticket, didn't you?" I did. It's valid. Ava hesitated, her jaw tightening. I just have a feeling. Maya let out a quiet sigh. Ava, come on, you know how this sounds. Undeterred, Ava grabbed the flight manifest and ran her finger down the list of first-class passengers. There it was. Ethan Blackwell. His name was printed in bold, confirming there were no errors in seating or upgrades, and yet her intuition screamed otherwise. I'm going to find out, she muttered under her breath, her eyes narrowing as she turned and strode purposefully back toward Ethan's seat, mentally rehearsing her next move. Taking a deliberate breath, Ava approached seat 1A once more. Despite knowing she had done her due diligence, her seasoned instincts told her that something about Ethan was out of place. The ticket was unquestionably valid, yet her mind raced with possibilities. Had he acquired the ticket through unusual means? Or was there an error she was missing? She stopped beside him, placing one hand on the headrest of the empty seat in front of him. Her voice was polite but firmer this time. Sir, I just need to confirm. Are you traveling alone? Ethan lowered his magazine and looked up at her again. This time his gaze lingered, as if he were trying to read her. Yes, I am. Ava forced a smile, though it was tight. And this ticket, it wasn't upgraded, was it? Ethan's expression didn't change. He sat still for a moment, his fingers lightly tapping the edge of the magazine before responding. No, it wasn't upgraded. I purchased it. His voice was smooth, calm, and uninterested in whatever game she was playing. But Ava wasn't done. She placed both hands on her hips, tilting her head slightly. Do you mind showing me your ID? A few heads in the first-class cabin turned slightly, with some passengers subtly watching the interaction. Ethan Blackwell exhaled quietly, closing the magazine. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet without a word, slid out his identification, and handed it to her. Ava took it, her eyes scanning the details. His name matched the ticket. His face was on the ID. Everything checked out. Yet she still didn't move. She stood there for a second too long, gripping his ID, her eyes narrowing slightly as she stared at him. There had to be something wrong. Ethan Blackwell finally spoke, his voice just as calm but with a slight edge. Now, is there a problem, miss? The way he said it made something tighten in Ava's chest. There was something in his tone, not aggressive, not defensive, but firm, a warning. She swallowed, glancing at the ID one more time before finally handing it back. No problem. Enjoy your flight. Ethan Blackwell took his ID and placed it back in his wallet. He didn't say anything else. He simply picked up his magazine and resumed reading. Ava, however, wasn't done. She turned on her heel and walked back toward the front of the plane, her mind racing. Something wasn't right. She just had to prove it. Ava stepped back into the galley, her breath coming a little faster than before. She wasn't sure why this was bothering her so much, but she couldn't let it go. Something about Ethan Blackwell didn't sit right with her. She had checked his ticket, his ID, everything was in order. But that feeling in her gut wouldn't go away. Maya, the younger flight attendant, noticed her pacing. Ava, you're still on about 1A? She asked, raising an eyebrow. Ava huffed, folding her arms. You didn't see the way he looked at me, like he knew something I didn't. Maya gave her a look. Or maybe she looked at her like that because she had just asked him for his ID, even after seeing his ticket. Ava shot her a glare but didn't respond. Instead, she grabbed the in-flight phone and pressed a button to call the ground crew. The line clicked and a voice on the other end answered. Flight ops, go ahead. This is Ava, lead cabin crew for flight 417. I need a ticket verification for a first-class passenger, Ethan Blackwell, seat 1A. There was a pause on the line, followed by typing sounds. Hold on a moment. His ticket was purchased under the name Ethan Blackwell, paid in full. No upgrades, no irregularities. Ava's grip on the phone tightened. And there's nothing unusual, no last-minute changes, no special requests. After more typing, the voice responded, "Nope, everything looks standard." Ava sighed, rubbing her forehead. "All right, thanks," she said and hung up the phone. Maya smirked. Well, was your mystery man secretly a stowaway? Ava ignored the sarcasm, shaking her head. "No, but I still don't trust it." Maya rolled her eyes. "Ava, you're looking for a problem that isn't there, just leave it alone." But Ava wasn't convinced. Passengers didn't just make her feel this uneasy for no reason. She pulled out her work tablet and opened the manifest again. Scrolling down, she stopped at Ethan Blackwell's name. Everything was correct, and yet she still felt like there was something missing. She thought for a moment, then decided that if she couldn't find proof now, she'd watch him throughout the flight. If something was off, she'd catch it. And if he didn't belong here, she'd make sure he didn't stay. Ava kept herself busy as passengers settled in, but her mind never left seat 1A. Every time she walked past, she stole a glance at Ethan Blackwell, searching for something, anything, that confirmed her suspicion. But he remained calm, flipping through his magazine, occasionally checking his phone like any normal passenger, yet something about him still felt wrong. She watched as another flight attendant, Jack, walked through first class offering drinks. When he reached Ethan Blackwell, his tone was warm. "Can I get you something to drink, sir?" Ethan Blackwell looked up with a polite but firm smile on his face. "Just water, please." Jack nodded, poured the drink, and handed it to him. Ethan Blackwell took it with a quiet, "Thank you." No arrogance, no demands, nothing out of the ordinary, and yet Ava felt her irritation grow. She had seen it too many times before. Passengers who tried to blend in where they didn't belong. Some were scammers, some were last-minute seat grabbers who switched after boarding, and some were just lucky upgrades who acted like they paid full price. She wasn't about to let someone pull that on her watch. She turned to Jack when he walked back to the galley. "Hey, what do you think about 1A? Jack frowned. "The guy who just asked for water? What about him?" Ava lowered her voice. "Don't you think he seems out of place?" Jack blinked. "What? No, he seems fine. Quiet, polite, honestly better than half the people up here." Ava tightened her lips. "I don't know, I just have a feeling." Jack chuckled. "A feeling, Ava? You really need to stop doing this." She ignored him, peeking toward first class again. Her stomach twisted when she saw Ethan Blackwell pull out his phone and type something. His expression never changed, but she swore there was something calculated about him. She tapped her nails against the counter. She was going to figure this out, and if he didn't belong in first class, she'd make sure this was his last time sitting there. Ava could feel her pulse in her ears as she moved through the first-class cabin, forcing herself to focus on other passengers. She refilled drinks, adjusted overhead bins, and smiled at the entitled businessman who barely acknowledged her. But every few minutes, her eyes drifted back to Ethan Blackwell in seat 10A. He hadn't caused a scene, he hadn't raised his voice, but something about him made her uneasy. It wasn't just his calmness, it was the fact that he seemed too comfortable, like he had nothing to prove. But men like Kim always had something to prove. She watched as he casually scrolled through his phone, then set it face down on his tray table. His fingers drummed lightly against the armrest in a slow, measured rhythm. He wasn't nervous, wasn't impatient. He was just waiting. Ava turned sharply and headed toward the galley where Maya was finishing up paperwork. She grabbed a glass, filling it with ice water, but her mind wasn't on the task. Maya sighed without looking up. "You're still obsessing over 1A, aren't you?" Ava exhaled, frustrated. "It's not obsessing," Maya replied. Something isn't right. He's too quiet, too composed." Maya let out a laugh. Oh no, a polite, well-mannered man in first class. How suspicious. Ava shot her a look. I'm serious. Maya leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You're picking a fight where there isn't one. You checked his ticket, you checked his ID, you even called the ground crew. What else do you need? A signed letter from the airline's CEO? Ava stiffened at that, then quickly masked it. Maya didn't notice the flicker of something that passed through Ava's expression, but Ava's own mind was already racing. She glanced back toward first class just in time to see Ethan Blackwell take a slow sip of his water before placing the glass neatly on his tray. The movement was too controlled. Ava tightened her grip on the counter. Something was off. She turned back to Maya. I'm just saying, I've been doing this job a long time and my gut is never wrong. Maya groaned, rubbing her temples. Your gut is always wrong. Ava ignored her, already forming a plan. If the ground crew wasn't going to back her up, and if Maya wanted to brush it off, then fine. She'd handle it herself. She smoothed out her uniform, took a breath, and marched back toward first class. She slowed her pace when she reached Ethan Blackwell's seat, resting one hand on the top of an empty chair across the aisle. He didn't look up. She hated that passengers in first class were always aware of the flight attendants. They expected attention, they demanded it, they acted like they owned the plane. But Ethan Blackwell, he sat there like he didn't have to prove himself to anyone. Ava cleared her throat. Excuse me, Mr. Foster. Slowly, Ethan Blackwell looked up, his face unreadable, his expression giving away nothing. Ava forced a smile. I just need to confirm one more thing with you. A few passengers shifted in their seats, glancing over. Ethan Blackwell didn't move. His eyes stayed on hers, patient, waiting. She placed both hands on the seat in front of him, leaning in slightly. Would you mind telling me what you do for a living? The question lingered in the air, unexpected and deliberate. For the first time since boarding, Ethan Blackwell's expression shifted. Not in surprise, not in anger, but in amusement, as if he had been expecting this moment. A slow, knowing smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Why? He asked, his voice calm. Ava hesitated for half a second but quickly recovered. I'm just curious. Ethan Blackwell tilted his head slightly, studying her curiously, or suspiciously. Ava's stomach tightened the way he said it. He knew. But instead of calling her out, instead of making a scene, he simply reached for his glass, took another sip of water, and placed it back down with that same deliberate ease. Then, with a small shrug, he answered, I own an airline. Silence. Ava's lips parted slightly, her mind racing. A few passengers nearby turned their heads. She forced out a small, confused laugh. You own an airline? Ethan Blackwell nodded, his smile never fading. That's what I said. She stared at him, waiting for him to elaborate, but he didn't. He let the words sit there, heavy and untouched. Ava's breath hitched. There was no way, no possible way, and yet something in his tone, the confidence, the certainty, the way he looked at her as if he were waiting for her to figure it out, made her stomach churn. She swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. Who was this man? Ava's mind was racing, but she forced herself to stay composed. She had spent years dealing with difficult passengers, entitled businessmen, celebrities who thought the world revolved around them, and first-class passengers who believed their money gave them control over the crew. She knew how to handle them. But Ethan Blackwell? He wasn't like any of them. He wasn't demanding. He wasn't throwing his wealth in her face. He wasn't even trying to argue. He had simply stated something so outrageous, so absurd, that for a moment she wasn't sure if he was playing some kind of game. Ava let out a short, stiff laugh. You own an airline. She crossed her arms, shifting her weight slightly. Which one? Ethan Blackwell's smile didn't fade. He picked up his water again, took another slow sip, and placed it back down before meeting her gaze. "You'll find out soon enough." Her stomach twisted. He wasn't joking. She didn't know why, but she believed him. Ava wasn't used to this. She was used to control. She was used to passengers who either obeyed or pushed back with visible irritation, but Ethan Blackwell? He was playing at a different level, one she couldn't quite figure out. The air around them felt heavier, as if a shift had just occurred and she was the only one who hadn't realized it yet. She straightened her uniform and cleared her throat. "All right, sir. If there's anything else you need, let me know." Ethan Blackwell gave her a small nod, as if dismissing her, and for some reason, that infuriated her. Ava turned on her heel, walking quickly toward the galley, her heart pounding. What the hell is going on? She pulled back the curtain separating the first-class section and the galley, nearly running into Maya, who raised an eyebrow. "Wow, you look like you've seen a ghost." Ava let out a breath, gripping the edge of the counter. "He says he owns an airline." Maya blinked. "Who?" Ava glared, and Maya snorted. "Oh, come on." Ava shook her head. "I'm serious. He looked me dead in the eye and said, 'I own an airline.'" Maya gave her a look. "And you believed him?" Ava hesitated. She didn't want to admit it, but yes, she did. Maya sighed, setting down the paperwork she had been reviewing. "Ava, you've been weird about this guy since the moment he sat down. What exactly do you think is happening here? That some billionaire secretly booked a flight on his own airline just to sit in first class like a regular person?" Ava opened her mouth, then closed it. That did sound ridiculous, but still, something was off. She didn't know what, but she was going to find out. She grabbed her work tablet again, scrolling through the passenger list for the third time. Ethan Blackwell's ticket confirmed. No flagged security concerns, no notes. But his name. Something about it nagged at her. Ava typed it into the airline's internal database, searching for any additional notes. The screen loaded. Access restricted. Her pulse spiked. She tried again. Same result. Maya peeked over her shoulder. "What are you doing?" Ava's mouth felt dry. "His profile is locked." Maya frowned. "So?" Ava slowly turned to look at her. "That only happens when someone is VIP." Maya's smirk faded. "What?" Ava swallowed hard, her fingers gripping the tablet a little tighter. She had only seen this happen a few times before. Executives, high-profile government officials, people with enough power that their travel information was kept private. Ethan Blackwell wasn't just a regular passenger, and if what he said was true, she had just made the biggest mistake of her career. Maya reached for the tablet, but Ava pulled it back, her mind spinning. She had questioned him, pressed him, pushed too far, and now she had a sinking feeling that whatever came next wasn't going to end well for her. Ava's breathing felt shallow as she stared at the screen. "Access restricted" now flashed in her mind like a warning sign, pounding at her chest, telling her she had just stepped into something far bigger than she had realized. VIP passengers weren't just anyone. They were people the airline protected. People whose information was locked down because of their wealth, power, or status. Ava had worked first class for years. She had served politicians, movie stars, and Fortune 500 executives. She had even seen a few minor royals pass through her cabin, and she knew the golden rule. You never, ever question the wrong person, and yet, that's exactly what she had done. Maya's voice pulled her back to the present. "Ava, what does that mean?" Ava turned to her, her voice lower now. "It means he's not some random guy. He's important." Maya let out a breath. "Okay, but important how?" Ava hesitated. "He said he owns an airline." Maya's eyes widened slightly before she scoffed. That's impossible. If he did, we'd know who he was. Ava shook her head. No, we wouldn't. Think about it. The people at the very top, the ones who actually run things, they don't need their names out there. They don't flaunt it. They don't make a show of who they are. They let everyone else do that for them. Maya frowned, rubbing her temples. All right, let's say, just for a second, that he's telling the truth. That doesn't mean it's our airline, right? Ava's fingers tightened around the tablet. She hadn't thought about that. There were dozens of major airlines in the world, and many had powerful owners who rarely, if ever, appeared in public. But if Ethan Blackwell was a name protected in their own system, that changed everything. A sinking feeling settled in her stomach. Maya exhaled sharply. Okay, fine. So maybe he's someone big. What do we do? Ava didn't answer. She couldn't, because no matter how she looked at it, she had already crossed a line. She turned back toward the first-class cabin, peeking through the curtain. Ethan Blackwell was still sitting there, completely relaxed. He had finished his water, his tray table was cleared, and he now rested with one arm draped over the seat, his gaze focused on the window, as if he had all the time in the world. No tension, no frustration, just patience, like he was waiting. Her fingers curled into a fist. Waiting for what? She turned back to Maya. I need to talk to the captain. Maya's head snapped up. What, Ava? No, that'll make this 1,000 times worse. Ava's jaw clenched. Worse than what? What if we have someone on board who could shut this whole airline down? Maya's face paled slightly. You don't know that. Ava swallowed. I don't, but I know that if he's really who he says he is, and I just treated him like a scammer trying to sneak into first class. I didn't need to finish that sentence. Maya exhaled, rubbing her hands over her face. Okay, but don't make a scene. Just be careful. Ava nodded and straightened her uniform before stepping out of the galley. She moved quickly, but with purpose, making her way toward the front of the plane. She could feel her pulse in her throat, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had to handle this the right way. When she reached the cockpit door, she knocked lightly. A few seconds later, Cole Hudson cracked it open. His brow furrowed, as if something was wrong. Ava hesitated for only a second before speaking. I need to talk. Talk to you. It's about a passenger. The captain's expression turned serious. What's the issue? Ava took a breath. I think we have someone important on board, and I think I might have just made a very, very big mistake. Cole Hudson didn't speak right away. He stepped back, opening the door wider. Come inside. Ava stepped through, and as the door clicked shut behind her, she realized something. This wasn't just about Ethan Blackwell. This was about her career. And if she wasn't careful, she wasn't going to have one by the time this flight landed. The cockpit was dimly lit, with the glow of screens reflecting off the polished metal panels. Cole Hudson stood near the control panel, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Beside him, Nolan Hayes glanced up from his tablet, sensing the tension immediately. Ava shifted on her feet, her palms slightly damp. This was not a conversation she wanted to have. Cole Hudson leaned against the back wall, nodding for her to speak. All right, what's going on? Ava took a breath. I have reason to believe we have a VIP passenger on board, someone extremely high up, and I may have questioned him. Cole Hudson's brows pulled together. Ava hesitated, choosing her words carefully. I didn't think he belonged in first class. The silence stretched between them like a noose tightening around her neck. Nolan Hayes sighed, rubbing his forehead. Ava's jaw clenched slightly. You're telling me you singled out a first-class passenger and basically accused him of sneaking in? Ava swallowed. I asked for his ticket, his ID. I even called the ground crew for verification. Everything checked out, but something felt off. Cole Hudson's expression hardened, and now Ava exhaled. I ran his name through the system. His profile is locked. I've only seen that happen for high-level executives or government officials. Cole Hudson's gaze flickered. Now she had his full attention. VIP status wasn't a joke. Airlines protected their most important passengers because the wrong treatment could mean lawsuits, media scandals, or worse. Powerful people pulling their business entirely. Nolan Hayes adjusted in his seat, suddenly more alert. "Who is it?" Ava hesitated. "Ethan Blackwell." Cole Hudson and Nolan Hayes exchanged a glance. Neither name recognition nor immediate panic crossed their faces, but there was a shift in the air. Nolan Hayes frowned. "I don't know that name." Ava's voice was tight. "He told me he owns an airline." Cole Hudson's face barely twitched, but the sharp inhale through his nose gave him away. Ava's stomach dropped. He knew something. Nolan Hayes frowned deeper, confused. "That doesn't make sense. We would know if—" Cole Hudson cut him off. "What exactly did he say?" Ava clenched her jaw, forcing herself to remember every detail. "I asked him what he did for a living. He looked at me like he had been waiting for the question. Then he said, 'I own an airline.'" Cole Hudson remained quiet for a moment before muttering, "Son of a..." He reached for his tablet, quickly typing something into a secure airline database. Ava's hands felt cold. She had never seen him react like this. Nolan Hayes, still confused, leaned over his shoulder. "What are you looking for?" Cole Hudson didn't answer right away. The screen flickered, and then he let out a slow breath. He turned the tablet so both of them could see. Ava's stomach plummeted. There, in bold letters, was Ethan Blackwell's full name and title. Ethan Blackwell, Chairman and Majority Stakeholder, Atlantic Global Airways. Owner, Office. The airline, the same airline they were flying for. The blood drained from Ava's face. She had just humiliated the owner of the airline. Nolan Hayes let out a quiet whistle. "Well, that's a problem." Ava felt her heartbeat in her ears. "This is a joke, right? This can't be real." Cole Hudson gave her a hard look. "Do I look like I'm joking?" Ava's stomach twisted painfully. Her entire body went cold. She had spent the last hour interrogating, doubting, and dismissing the man who literally owned the company that signed her paycheck. Her breathing felt shallow. "What do I do?" Cole Hudson exhaled sharply, setting the tablet down. "You fix it now." Ava's hands were slightly shaking. "How? What am I supposed to say? Sorry for assuming you don't belong in your own airline?" Nolan Hayes gave her a sideways glance. "That'd be a good start." Ava closed her eyes for a second, then nodded quickly. "Okay, I'll go to him. I'll apologize." Cole Hudson's voice stopped her before she could turn. "No, not just an apology." Ava hesitated. "What do you mean?" Cole Hudson's voice was level, but there was an edge of finality in it. "You're going to fix this in front of the entire first-class cabin." Ava's stomach dropped further. She had humiliated Ethan Blackwell in public, and now she had to correct it in public. She opened her mouth to protest, but one look at Cole Hudson's face told her there was no room for negotiation. She had messed up, and now she was about to pay the price. Ava felt like the walls of the cockpit were closing in around her. Her breath was shallow, her stomach tight. The reality of what she had done, who she had done it to, was fully sinking in. Now, she had made a mistake before plenty of times in her career, but never like this. Never with someone who had the power to erase her career with a single phone call. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to pull it together and fix it in front of everyone. That was the captain's order, and that was the only way to stop this from spiraling into something worse. Ava's legs felt heavier than they ever had as she stepped out of the cockpit, the cabin stretching before her like a runway. She wasn't sure she could walk down. The moment she emerged, Maya shot her a questioning look. "Well?" Ava didn't answer. She didn't have time. Her heart pounded in her chest as she smoothed out her uniform, straightened her shoulders, and forced her legs to move. The walk to 1A felt like it lasted forever. She could feel passengers watching her, sensing a shift in energy they didn't quite understand yet. But Ethan Blackwell, he hadn't moved. He sat there as still as ever, one arm resting lightly on the armrest, his expression unreadable, waiting. She reached his seat, swallowing hard, before she spoke. "Mr. Blackwell." The moment his name left her lips, a few first-class passengers turned their heads slightly. Some of them had overheard bits and pieces of their earlier conversation, but now they were paying full attention. Ethan Blackwell glanced up at her. His expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Not surprise, not anger, just quiet expectation. Ava's throat felt tight, but she forced herself to push through. "I need to apologize." A ripple of silence settled over the first-class cabin. The nearby passengers, who had been pretending not to listen, were now fully tuned in. Ethan Blackwell didn't react. He didn't nod or raise an eyebrow. He simply waited. Ava took a breath. "Earlier I questioned your seat, your ticket, and your right to be here. I made an assumption, and that was a mistake." Still, Ethan Blackwell didn't move. Ava's palms felt clammy, but she didn't look away. "You were nothing but polite, and I treated you unfairly. That is not how any passenger should be treated, especially not someone who built this airline." Now the nearby passengers stiffened. A murmur ran through the cabin as the realization hit them. They all knew first class had VIPs. They knew some of the world's most powerful people sat in these seats. But none of them had realized they were sitting next to the man who owned the entire airline. Ethan Blackwell exhaled through his nose, shaking his head slightly. Not out of amusement, not out of anger, but with something else. He looked up at Ava and asked, "And why did you assume I didn't belong?" Ava's breath caught in her throat. That was the question she had been hoping he wouldn't ask. The nearby passengers turned their attention fully to her now. Some shifted in their seats, others looked away, pretending not to be part of this moment. Ava's lips parted, but no words came out. She knew exactly why she had questioned him. It wasn't his clothes, it wasn't his behavior, it wasn't his attitude. It was because she had never expected to see a black man sitting alone in first class, carrying himself like he belonged there without needing to prove it. She felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This wasn't just about Ethan Blackwell, this was about every person she had silently judged before. Every time she had seen a passenger and decided, without proof or reason, that something wasn't right. Ethan Blackwell was staring at her now, waiting for an answer. Ava swallowed. She could lie, give some excuse about his demeanor or about how quiet he had been, but that wasn't the truth. And something told her Ethan Blackwell didn't tolerate lies. Her hands clenched at her sides as she forced herself to speak. "Because I made a bad judgment, and I have no excuse." Ethan Blackwell studied her for a long moment, then slowly he nodded. Not in forgiveness, not in approval, just in acknowledgement. A few of the nearby passengers let out slow breaths, as if they had been holding them the entire time. Ava's face burned with shame, but she held her posture. Ethan Blackwell leaned back slightly, tapping a single finger on the armrest before speaking again. "You're right. You don't have an excuse." Ava felt the words sink into her skin. Ethan Blackwell let a pause stretch between them before he sighed, shaking his head slightly. "What happens now?" Ava had no idea. She had done what the captain told her. She had apologized, owned her mistake, but now she was standing in front of the most powerful man in the airline industry, and she had no idea what came next. Ethan Blackwell, however, did. He picked up his phone, typed a message, and sent it. Then he glanced back at Ava, his expression calm. "You should probably sit down." Her stomach twisted. Something was coming, and it was bigger than anything she had expected. Ava's heart pounded in her chest. Sit down. She didn't even have a seat. She was supposed to be working, supposed to be moving through the cabin, assisting passengers, making sure everything ran smoothly. But as she stood in front of Ethan Blackwell, the man who owned the airline she worked for, she realized that none of that mattered anymore. She had messed up, and now she was just waiting to see how bad the consequences would be. Ethan Blackwell's fingers tapped lightly on his phone screen before he set it down on the tray table. His expression remained calm, unreadable, but something about him felt heavier now. The easy patience he had shown earlier was gone. A flight attendant questioning a first-class passenger was one thing, but questioning the owner of the airline? That was something else entirely. Ava felt the weight of the first-class passenger's eyes on her. No one was pretending to be uninterested anymore. They had caught the way Ethan Blackwell had spoken to her, the way her voice had wavered in response. They knew something serious was happening. Then, as if to confirm it, the in-flight phone rang. The sound cut through the thick air like a warning bell. Ava stiffened, her breath catching. The nearest flight attendant, Jack, quickly stepped into the galley and grabbed the phone, holding it to his ear. "Yes, Captain?" Silence. Then Jack's face changed. His eyes flickered toward Ava. She knew, even before he spoke, that something was wrong. Jack lowered the phone, turning to her with an unreadable expression. "The captain wants to see you." A wave of nausea rolled through her stomach. The words felt like a final blow. Ava swallowed, her mind screaming at her to keep herself together. But it was too late for composure. Too late to undo what had already been done. The passengers who had been pretending to mind their own business were now staring outright, some whispering to one another, others just watching the scene unfold. Ethan Blackwell didn't look at her as she took a slow step back. He didn't need to. He had already played his move. Ava turned stiffly and started toward the front of the cabin. Her uniform felt too tight, the heat in her face burning as she pushed past the curtain into the galley. Jack whispered, "Ava, what did you do?" She ignored him. She couldn't think about that right now. She reached the cockpit door and knocked once. The door opened immediately, and Cole Hudson stood there, his face unreadable. But the moment Ava stepped inside, the air in the cockpit felt suffocating, like a verdict had already been decided. She barely made it over the threshold before the captain spoke. "You done for the day?" Her throat went dry. "Sir, no." Ava blinked. His voice was sharp, cutting. "You've already done enough." Ava's lips parted, but nothing came out. Cole Hudson exhaled, rubbing his temples before looking at her again. "Ethan Blackwell has already contacted corporate. Your name is flagged for immediate disciplinary review." The room tilted. Ava gripped the back of the empty co-pilot's chair, trying to steady herself. Disciplinary review? Her head spun. This wasn't just a warning. This wasn't just a bad performance note on her record. This was a career-ending situation. Nolan Hayes shifted awkwardly in his seat, clearly uncomfortable with what was happening, but not willing to speak up. Ava forced herself to find her voice. "Sir, I didn't know who he was." Cole Hudson let out a cold laugh. "And that's the problem." Ava's nails dug into her palm. "I was doing my job." The captain's gaze turned steely. "No, you were doing what you thought was your job, and you were wrong." Silence stretched as Ava's pulse thundered in her ears. She had made mistakes before, had argued with passengers who were out of line, had been firm with travelers who tried to push the limits of what they were allowed. But this? She had never been in this kind of situation before. Cole Hudson sat down in his chair, staring at the flight control, as if trying to compose himself. Then he spoke again. You'll disembark with security when we land. Ava's breath hitched, the world around her blurred. Security. The weight of that single word crashed over her like a tidal wave. She had seen it happen before. Crew members removed from flights, quietly escorted through back terminals, never to return. Ava knew what that meant. She wasn't just being reprimanded, she was being removed. She opened her mouth to argue, to defend herself, but no words came. Nothing she said would change what had already been decided. Cole Hudson's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. This isn't just about you. Her gaze snapped to his. His expression was cold, unforgiving. You embarrassed this airline in front of the man who owns it. Ava's stomach twisted violently. You questioned his right to sit in first class. You treated him like an imposter in his own business. The weight of the truth crushed her. Cole Hudson leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. You didn't just offend a passenger, you disrespected the most powerful man in this industry. Ava stood frozen. There was nothing left to say. She had made her choice, and now she was about to pay for it. The moment Ava stepped out of the cockpit, the air inside the cabin felt thicker. She had always walked these aisles with authority, confidence, and control. She had always believed that she set the rules and maintained order. Now she was walking back through first class like a condemned woman. Passengers were watching. No longer pretending, not hiding their curiosity. Some of them had overheard just enough to put the pieces together. Others had their eyes locked on Ethan Blackwell, who still sat in 1A, completely composed, completely unbothered, as if he had already won. Ava swallowed the bitter lump in her throat as she forced her legs to move. She wanted to turn away, to disappear into the galley, but she knew that was impossible. Now she had to face him. She stopped beside his seat, her hands tightening at her sides. Ethan Blackwell finally looked up, his expression unreadable. He had been expecting her. The silence stretched. Ava could feel the weight of the moment, the judgment hanging between them, the complete shift in power. She cleared her throat, forcing her voice to remain steady. Mr. Blackwell, he held up a hand, stopping her instantly. No need. His voice was calm, smooth. I already know what you're going to say. Ava's stomach twisted. Did he know she had just been ordered to leave the plane with security? Did he know that her career, her entire future, was balancing on the edge of a knife? Ethan Blackwell exhaled, shaking his head slightly. You're not the first person to assume I don't belong somewhere, and you won't be the last. His words hit harder than she expected, because he wasn't just talking about this flight. He was talking about something much bigger. Ava's throat felt tight. I was wrong. His gaze didn't soften. Yes, you were. Her face burned. She had never felt this small. She thought back to how easily she had doubted him, how she had let her assumptions dictate her actions, how she had refused to accept the truth even when it was right in front of her. How many other people had she done this to? Ethan Blackwell leaned back slightly, his fingers tapping once on the armrest. Tell me something, Ava. Her breath caught. He knew her name. She hadn't introduced herself. He had never asked, and yet he knew. That realization sent a fresh wave of unease through her. Ethan Blackwell tilted his head slightly. If I had been wearing an expensive suit, flashing a watch, barking orders at you, would you have treated me the same way? Ava didn't answer immediately because the truth was ugly, and he already knew it. She had seen plenty of first-class passengers who were loud, demanding, and arrogant. She had never questioned them. But a quiet black man sitting alone, minding his own business, that had been enough. Her chest felt tight. I can't change what I did, but I can own it. Ethan Blackwell studied her for a long moment before giving a small nod. Not approval, just acknowledgement. Then, without another word, he reached for his phone again, typed something, and sent it. And that was it. Ava's breath felt shaky as she stepped back, unsure of what had just happened, what had just been decided. Ethan Blackwell hadn't needed to yell at her, hadn't needed to raise his voice, hadn't needed to threaten her. He had handled it all with control, with quiet power. And somehow, that was even worse. She turned, walking back toward the galley, her mind spinning. Then, just as she reached the curtain, the in-flight phone rang again. Every muscle in her body locked up. She turned slowly as Jack picked it up, glancing at her before answering, "Yes, Captain?" A pause. Jack blinked, his eyebrows furrowing. He nodded once, then hung up. When he turned to Ava, his expression was unreadable. "You're not getting off with security anymore." Her breath hitched. "What?" She stared at him, her pulse pounding. "What do you mean?" Jack hesitated, then gestured toward Ethan Blackwell. "I mean," he changed his mind. Ava's entire world shifted. Ethan Blackwell had just spared her. She turned back toward 1A, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. Ethan Blackwell was already looking at her, that same calm, unreadable expression on his face. Ava's chest felt tight. "Why? Why did you give me a way out? Why haven't you let me crash and burn?" She didn't know. But what she did know was that she would never forget this moment for the rest of her life. Ava felt like she had been dropped into a different reality. Just minutes ago, she had been certain her career was over. Security was supposed to escort her off the plane. The captain himself had told her that Ethan Blackwell, the man she had humiliated, the man she had treated like an imposter, had already flagged her for disciplinary review. And now he had changed his mind. Her head was spinning as she stepped back toward the galley, gripping the counter for support. Jack watched her closely, his voice low. What just happened? Ava swallowed hard. She had no answer, because none of this made sense. She had expected Ethan Blackwell to let the punishment play out. She had deserved it. But instead, he had spared her. And now, the one question hammering in her mind was why. Her breathing was shallow as she peered through the curtain, watching him. Ethan Blackwell sat there, still composed, still unfazed, as if nothing had happened at all. He scrolled through his phone, took another sip of water, completely at ease. The first-class passengers had picked up on the shift. She could see it in the way they looked at him. Now some stole glances, some whispered quietly, and others looked embarrassed. They had sat there and watched her question him. They had seen her doubt him, and not one of them had spoken up. Now, though, they knew exactly who he was, and none of them would forget it. Ava's pulse thundered as she turned back into the galley. She couldn't just stand there. She needed to do something right. She moved quickly, grabbing a fresh towel, a tray, and a glass of sparkling water. She added a lemon wedge and made sure the napkin was folded perfectly. Jack frowned. "What are you doing?" Ava didn't answer. She had already humiliated herself once, and she wasn't about to make it worse. Her legs felt heavy as she stepped back into the cabin, balancing the tray carefully. It felt like the longest walk of her life. She reached 1A and carefully placed the drink on his tray table. Ethan Blackwell didn't look up. He let the silence stretch, as if deciding whether or not to acknowledge her. Ava cleared her throat, forcing herself to speak. "I know an apology isn't enough, Mr. Blackwell, but I was wrong. Completely. And I appreciate your patience more than I deserve." Ethan Blackwell finally looked up. He studied her, not with anger, not with irritation, just calm observation. Then, after a long moment, he nodded once, a small, quiet acknowledgement. That was it. Ava let out a slow breath, realizing that this was the closest thing to closure she was going to get. She turned to walk away, but just as she did, Ethan Blackwell spoke. "Ava," she froze. She turned back slowly. He had never used her name before today. Ethan Blackwell leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on the armrest. "Do you know why I changed my mind?" Ava's mouth felt dry. She shook her head. "No, sir." Ethan Blackwell tapped a single finger against the tray table, his gaze steady. "Because accountability means more than punishment." Ava felt something shift inside her. Ethan Blackwell wasn't the kind of man who sought revenge. He wasn't looking to destroy her career. He was looking to teach a lesson that would last longer than any punishment ever could, and she would never forget it. The silence stretched between them again, before Ethan Blackwell gave her a final nod. Dismissed. Ava turned and walked away, feeling the weight of the moment settle into her bones. This wasn't just about her job anymore. It was about who she would choose to be moving forward. Ava had walked these aisles 1,000 times before, but never like this. Never with her heart pounding in her chest. Never with her mind racing over the consequences of her own actions. The cabin felt different now. The energy had shifted. She could see it in the way passengers sat, how some stole glances at Ethan Blackwell, others looked away out of second-hand embarrassment. They had witnessed everything. They had watched her challenge him, had seen her doubt him, and now they knew exactly who he was. Ava swallowed hard and stepped back into the galley, barely noticing Maya and Jack standing there. The moment she entered, Jack hailed loudly, "Okay, what the hell just happened?" Maya's arms were folded tightly over her chest. "That's what I'd like to know." Ava gripped the counter, trying to steady herself. She was still trying to figure it out herself. A few minutes ago, she had been convinced her career was over. The captain had told her she was done. Security was supposed to be waiting for her at the gate. And yet Ethan Blackwell had changed everything with a single message. Jack's voice was lower now. "Seriously, what did you say to him?" Ava shook her head. "It wasn't about what I said." Maya narrowed her eyes. "Then what was it?" Ava exhaled sharply, looking away. She didn't want to say it out loud. She didn't want to admit that Ethan Blackwell had done what no one else ever had. He had forced her to confront herself. He had held up a mirror and made her see exactly what kind of person she had been in that moment. And instead of punishing her, he had done something worse. He had made her live with it. She turned back toward the curtain, peeking out into the cabin once more. Ethan Blackwell was still in 1A, still perfectly composed, scrolling through his phone as if he hadn't just completely changed the course of her life. Ava's stomach twisted. Maya's voice was softer now. "Are you okay?" Ava let out a quiet laugh. It wasn't funny, but it was the only reaction I had left. Am I okay? She had spent her entire career believing she was good at her job, that she knew people, that she could read a situation, and in a single evening she had been proven dead wrong. Her voice was barely above a whisper when she finally responded. "I don't know." Jack and Maya exchanged a glance, but neither of them pushed her further, because they all knew this wasn't just about one mistake. This was about something much bigger. Something that would follow her forever. And whether she liked it or not, she was going to have to live with it. Ava had always prided herself on being in control. She knew how to handle passengers, how to diffuse difficult situations, and how to command respect without demanding it. But for the first time in her career, she wasn't in control. She stood in the galley, gripping the edge of the counter so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her pulse was still racing, her chest tight. Everything that had just happened, the confrontation, the realization, the public humiliation, was circling in her mind like a storm she couldn't escape. And Ethan Blackwell was still sitting there, as if he hadn't just altered the course of her life. Jack let out a low whistle. So, what now? Ava didn't answer, because for the first time in a long time she had no idea what would happen next. She had assumed Ethan Blackwell would let the captain's decision stand, that he would let her career crash and burn the same way she had almost ruined his experience on this flight. And yet, he didn't. Why? Why did he change his mind? Why did he spare me? Ava exhaled shakily, pressing her fingertips against her temple. Because he wanted her to live with it. That realization hit her harder than anything else. If he had let her be escorted off the plane, she would have been humiliated. Yes, she probably would have lost her job, probably struggled to find another one in the industry, but eventually she would have found a way to justify it. She would have convinced herself that Ethan Blackwell had been the problem, that he had been arrogant, that he had been unreasonable, that he had set her up to fail. But this was worse. Because now every time she stepped onto a plane, every time she saw a first-class passenger settle into their seat, every time she questioned someone in the smallest way, she would think about him. She would remember what she had done. She would remember the way he had handled it. And she would know deep down that it had never been about him. It had been about her. Maya watched her closely, something unreadable in her expression. "You okay, Ava?" Ava let out a breath that felt heavier than it should have. I don't know," she admitted. Maya leaned back against the counter, her arms crossed. "Well, if it makes you feel any better, I think everyone in first class feels like crap now." Ava blinked. "What?" Maya smirked slightly. "Come on, you saw their faces. Every single one of them watched you question him. Every single one of them heard you doubt him, and not one of them said a damn thing. Not one of them stood up for him. Not one of them told you to back off." She tilted her head toward the curtain, toward the silent first-class cabin. "Now they all know. They sat next to the man who owns this airline, and they let it happen." Ava hadn't even thought about that. She had been so focused on her own mistake that she hadn't realized it wasn't just hers. It was theirs too. Jack rubbed the back of his neck. "I mean, it's kind of genius when you think about it." Ava shot him a sharp look. "What?" Jack shrugged. "Think about it. He could have just told you who he was immediately, could have pulled rank, embarrassed you, gotten you thrown off the flight right away." He nodded toward 1A, toward Ethan Blackwell, who still looked completely calm. But he didn't. Ava's breath caught. Jack continued. "He let you do it. He let you doubt him. Let you assume, let everyone else assume. Let them all feel comfortable. Let them all believe that they were right." His voice dropped slightly, and then he let the truth hit everyone at once. Ava's heart skipped a beat. That was exactly what he had done. Ethan Blackwell had never been powerless in that moment. He had never been a victim. He had been in control the entire time. He had let everyone reveal their own biases, their own assumptions, their own quiet approval of what was happening. And then, without ever raising his voice, without ever needing to argue, he had flipped the entire plane on its head. Jack chuckled under his breath. "Honestly, I kind of respect it." Ava's stomach turned because now she knew the truth. Ethan Blackwell hadn't just taught her a lesson. He had taught the entire plane one. And the worst part was, they would all remember it forever. She turned away from the curtain, her hands still shaking slightly. Maya watched her carefully. "So, what are you going to do?" Ava swallowed. Her mind was still spinning. "What am I supposed to do? What could I possibly say? What could I possibly do that would change any of this?" She had already made her choice. She had already shown Ethan Blackwell exactly who she was, and now she had to live with it. Ava had always thought of herself as the kind of person who knew right from wrong. She had worked for this airline for years. she knew the ins and outs of first-class service better than anyone. She knew when someone was trying to sneak an upgrade, when someone was lying about their status, when someone was pushing their luck. She had been so sure she was right about Ethan Blackwell, and yet she had never been more wrong about anything in her life. She took a deep breath, staring at her reflection in the polished metal of the galley cabinets. The woman looking back at her wasn't the same one who had started this flight. That woman had been confident, certain, unshakable. Now, she wasn't sure of anything. Jack and Maya had retreated into their own duties, the tension still thick in the air but slowly settling. Ava knew that word would spread, the story of what happened on this flight. It wouldn't stay confined to these walls. Other flight attendants would hear about it. Pilots would hear about it. Corporate would hear about it. Even if Ethan Blackwell had decided not to have her thrown off the flight, that didn't mean she was safe. She would still be reviewed, still be questioned, still be held accountable. She swallowed hard and took one last look at herself before stepping out of the galley. The first-class cabin was quieter than usual. Passengers weren't talking as much. The usual hum of polite conversation was gone. She felt their eyes on her as she walked back through the aisle, some curious, some judgmental, some ashamed. But Ethan Blackwell still wasn't looking at her. She felt like that was intentional. He wasn't the kind of man who wasted time on people who weren't worth it. And right now, that's exactly what she felt like. She reached the service station at the front of the cabin and started checking on the other passengers, forcing herself to go through the motions. A refill here, a small polite smile there. She tried to pretend nothing had happened, but everyone knew, including her. A deep voice suddenly cut through the silence. "Excuse me." Ava froze. Ethan Blackwell slowly turned toward 1A, her pulse thundering. He was looking at her now, his expression still unreadable, still measuring her. For a second, she thought he was going to tell her off after all, but he didn't. Instead, he simply said, "I'd like another water, please." That was it. No lecture, no reminder of what had happened. Just a request, like she was just another flight attendant, like he was just another passenger, like she was still worthy of doing her job. Ava blinked, unsure of how to respond for a second. Then quickly she nodded. "Of course, Mr. Blackwell." Her voice was steady now, not because she had forgotten what happened, not because she had forgiven herself, but because she finally understood. Ethan Blackwell had given her something far worse than punishment. He had given her the chance to be better, and that was something she couldn't waste. She turned, moving with purpose, grabbing a fresh glass, filling it with cold water, carefully placing a lemon wedge inside just as she had before. But this time she wasn't just serving a first-class passenger. She was serving the man who had just changed her life forever. She carried the tray back to his seat, placed it down gently in front of him, and stepped back. Ethan Blackwell met her eyes one final time, and this time there was something new in his gaze. Not approval, not forgiveness, but recognition. A quiet acknowledgement that she had learned something today, a lesson she would carry for the rest of her life. Ava stood there for half a second longer before giving a slight nod, then without another word she turned and walked away, letting the moment settle into her bones. This flight would land soon. The world would keep moving, but she would never be the same. The lesson we can take from this story is to be cautious of our own prejudices and to treat everyone with respect, whether in a professional setting or in everyday life. The narrative shows that judging someone solely by their appearance or relying on preconceived notions can have serious consequences. Not only can such snap judgments hurt another person's dignity, but they can also backfire on us. Ava, as a flight attendant, made the mistake of letting her assumptions override her reason. Her overconfidence and bias led her to treat a man unfairly, only to later discover that he was not just any passenger. He was the owner of the airline. In a surprising twist, instead of seeking revenge, he taught her a powerful lesson in accountability. This experience forced Ava to reflect on her behavior and to learn that the best way to grow is by admitting mistakes and improving from them. In the end, it's a reminder for all of us to keep our judgments in check and approach each person with humility and respect. Do you believe she truly got what she deserved? Hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me if you see this as pure karma at work or simply a lesson learned from a hard-earned mistake. And while you're here, subscribe for more engaging stories with unexpected twists and powerful insights into the human experience. Your support means the world, and I promise, there's plenty more where that came from. Truly.